Okay, so there's some questions, short marker questions here that I'm going to do with you. I'm going to model how to do some of them, and then you're going to do the rest. So I'm just going to look at these biological ones for now. So we can say there is kind of a set structure for some of these that you have to follow. So outline the biological area. So this question could get asked in a few different ways, which are similar to each other but a little bit different to each other as well. So you could get asked to just outline the biological area, and that could be for 2 marks or for 4 marks. Now, the difference between 2 marks and 4 marks is the amount of information that you have to give if you're outlining the area. So if you got asked to outline the biological area for just 2 marks, it would essentially want you to provide one assumption or core principle of the biological area and then give some detail on it. If it asks this for 4 marks, it essentially wants you to do that twice. So 2 assumptions and detail on both, at least 2 assumptions. Maybe even consider giving 3 assumptions if there are 3 assumptions, but then providing detail on 2 of them. And similarly, they could ask you to outline one core belief or one concept in the biological area, or 2 core beliefs or 2 concepts, and by them they mean the assumptions, basically. So, outline the biological area for 4 marks. So for this, I may write that the biological approach assumes that all that is psychological is first physiological. This would essentially mean that all behaviour has a biological cause, okay, and that's what you need to outline there. So it's not enough to give that assumption, you need to outline that assumption further, okay. So you could say this suggests that all thoughts and behaviours appear to have a biological basis, either through, or you could put, for example, brain dysfunction, neurotransmitters. So obviously, for example, you looked at things like serotonin and the impact on depression symptoms, and hormones, because again we looked at things like testosterone and how that can influence behaviour such as aggression. That's the kind of answer that you would give if this question was asked for 2 marks. So if this question was asked, outline one principle or one concept in the biological area, or outline the biological area for 2 marks, that's what you'd write. As it's for 4 marks, we need to write a little bit more. So you can say, furthermore, the biological area assumes that much behaviour has a genetic basis. Can everyone hear my dog stropping in the background because I'm writing model answers for you guys and not paying attention to him. So anyway, furthermore, the biological area assumes that much behaviour has a genetic basis. This, and then expand on that a little bit further. So this means that we can investigate the biological roots of behaviour through twin and adoption studies to investigate whether characteristics are inherited. Okay, and that's really all we need to put. So I've given an assumption there, and I've expanded on both of those. So then that is enough for 4 marks. Okay, this one's just a little bit different, so you're not going to necessarily get asked this for every single one, but you can get asked sometimes to outline how an area links with a debate. So I'm going to put one of these in for you to have a bit of a practice, but essentially here what you have to do, it says describe how the biological area provides an individual explanation for behaviour. So I need to be able to essentially show an understanding of what the biological area suggests, an understanding of what the individual explanation of behaviour suggests, so the individual side of the individual situational debate, and then demonstrate how those two link together. It's for 3 marks, and I've just said 3 things that need to be done in this answer. So in theory, therefore, it's a mark for each one, in theory. Okay, so for this answer, I may write that the individual explanation of behaviour suggests that internal factors such as mood, personality, or unique biological factors can account for behaviour rather than situational factors. The biological area suggests that all behaviours have a physiological cause, be it hormones, genes, or brain structure. Therefore, these 2 concepts link together as these biological factors are often unique and internal causes for behaviour. Okay, so really a very, very straightforward answer. So therefore these 2 concepts link together as these biological factors are often unique and internal causes for behaviours. Okay, so there's just a little model answer for that one. So this next question, outline one way the biological area has been applied to explaining human behaviour. Justify your response with evidence from a core study. This one I have only ever seen asked for the individual differences area so far, but essentially what you need to be able to do in this is show an understanding of how the area explains behaviour in general. So it's not asking for you to name topics that we have studied as part of studies in the biological area. It's not asking for that information. It's not asking what studies fit into that area. It's not asking you to describe research in that area. It is essentially saying that you can use evidence from a relevant core study in order to basically describe roughly how that area explains behaviour in general. Okay. So I'm going to start typing up a bit of a model answer for you. Okay, so the first sentence that I've written out there, the biological area has often focused on the study of localization of function. So we did talk about localization of function when we first started looking at the biological area. We said that there is such a thing as lateralization of functioning, which suggests that the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere have different functions. But then there's localization of function, which is looking at particular brain structures and what are their functions. Okay, so I'm just literally starting off by saying what the biological area generally focuses on, which is lateralization, or rather localization, sorry, in this case of function. Okay, so that's where I am just going to make a start with this response. And then I just need to take that a little bit further. So here you can see I've just taken that a little bit further. So I've added this sentence on. So I've already said that we generally look at localization of functioning. Then I've taken that a bit further by saying that in order to establish which brain regions are responsible for these different functions, we will use, in biological psychology, brain imaging techniques such as the fMRI, which are used to establish neural correlates of behaviour. And remember, by neural correlates of behaviour, I essentially mean what parts of the brain demonstrate activity during the performance of a particular behaviour. I'm not typing. And this is then used to make assumptions about the reasons for the behaviour of others. Okay. Then I'm going to start giving some detail on a study. So I will then likely say that, for example, in Casey's study of delay of gratification, researchers established that there are biological influences over your choice between long-term rewards and short-term rewards. So I can say that this research used an fMRI scan to establish that those who made more impulse control false alarms demonstrated increased activity in reward related regions such as the ventral striatum, whereas the cognitive control associated with delaying gratification showed activity in other prefrontal cortex regions, which demonstrates that our biology may impact upon cognitive controls. Okay, so here what's got me marks in this answer is I've been able to basically give a summary of what the biological area generally looks at, that gives a specific example of a behaviour that we're interested in, or a factor that we're interested in, like localisation of function. I've been able to expand on that a bit further to say how we actually apply that understanding to gaining information about why humans behave in the way they do, by saying we do this with an fMRI scanner. And why we use that fMRI scanner is it enables us to look at neural correlates. For example, here's a bit of research which does that, and that's what that suggests about the biological area. It demonstrates how biology may impact upon cognitive controls. Okay, so those ones are a little bit tricky, they're not very nice, but I'm going to get you to have a go at a couple of them. Okay, and the very last one that I'm going to practice with you is this one. So outlining a strength and a weakness of the biological area. So these ones are really straightforward. Outlinings of strengths and weaknesses are just pre-ill paragraphs. So as it's asked for a strength and a weakness, it's going to be usually for 6 marks, and that means that just like in any other evaluate question, really generally, you are going to get 3 marks from one pre-ill paragraph. Now you need to pack terminology into these. So I will start by saying that one strength of the biological area is that it can be considered scientific. Because, so that's my point, objective and reliable methods of study are used. Okay, and that's my reason. Okay, then I'm going to give some evidence. So, for example, in cases study of delay of gratification, the objective fMRI scan was used to establish which brain areas showed elevated activity while participants either demonstrated cognitive control or a lack thereof. So there's my evidence, okay? So I've given a strength, I've given a reason, I've given a piece of evidence to back up the claim that I'm making from the biological area. Now, in these questions, they need to be related to, the evidence you give needs to be related evidence, so it needs to be relevant context from a study. So I'm saying that it's objective and reliable methods of study. I've given an example of a reliable and objective method of study, and now I just need to explain that. Okay, so this can be considered scientific as the fMRI uses a standardized procedure of analysis, and therefore should provide consistency in the measurement of brain activity which is unaffected by bias. And then I just need to kind of say what the impact of that is. So therefore, as biological research is generally scientific, it is often valid. Okay, so there's my strength. Okay, now I'm going to give a weakness. So we can say one weakness of the biological area is that it is deterministic, as it suggests that behaviour is predetermined by our biology. Okay, so there we go. Again, I've given a point. It's a weakness that it's deterministic. I've given a reason because it's predetermined by our biology. Then I need to give an example, and then I'll need to expand upon that. So it doesn't really matter if the example you give is from the same study. It can be a different study. It can be the same study in these strengths and weaknesses questions. It's not really relevant which you do, as long as it is a biological study. So I can say here, for example, in Casey's research, the ability of a person to exercise cognitive control is supposedly determined by the amount of activity in particular brain regions, which is deterministic as it ignores the possibility of free will that someone, this is my explanation, may be able to learn some element of cognitive control ability. Now, whenever you're talking about debates, it's not enough to just say one strength is it's deterministic and that's it. You need to say why it's a strength that something's deterministic or why it's a weakness that something is deterministic, because being deterministic on its own can be a strength or it can be a weakness. So one reason why you can say that being deterministic is a weakness is because we've said that it removes the possibility of free will, and if it removes the possibility of free will, then actually it's saying that people aren't responsible for their own behaviour, essentially, and then that can become a weakness because we're saying that your behaviour cannot, you don't have control over your behaviour to kind of positively impact it and change it. So that is why it is a strength that something is deterministic. So I'm just going to add that on to the end. So one weakness of the biological area is that it's deterministic, suggests behaviour is predetermined by biology. For example, in Casey's research, ability to exercise cognitive control is determined by amount of activity in brain regions, which is deterministic as it ignores the possibility of free will, someone being able to learn some element of cognitive control. So I've explained, I just need to link back and to say what the impact of that is, which is a weakness as it means that people are not responsible for their own behaviour, and this can be a pessimistic view of human behaviour. Okay, and that's all you really need in that question. So like I say, 2 real paragraphs is enough. So the rest of this document has lots of questions in, and I want you to spend the rest of this lesson trying to fill out some of those for me. Please just get as far as you can, and I will access your Google Doc and I will comment on them. Okay, thank you.